you never really think this is going to happen to you, you know? And it's not like you just wake up one day and know that you're addicted, you know? It's slow. I wish there was more that I could do about it. But unfortunately, I'm too far gone. I feel like this is my life now. But I think the most important thing is I let you guys know what's going on.
Yeah, could you just state your name and why you're here?
No. My name is Badger, and I am a Sentinel of Purity addict. Welcome! It's your friendly neighbourhood Badger here, and it is time for the ultimate, comprehensive, and conclusive Sentinel Queen guide. My Herald of Purity Necromancer with more power than ever before seen. Budget damage of 9 million Shaper DPS? Yes please. End game DPS of 49 million? Okay, I'll take that thanks. Variation and options of items, spectres, shields, and even ascendancies? You got it right here. Given the complexity of this guide, we will take it one step at a time, but I will initially outline the two main versions. Firstly, the budget version is built around the chess piece, the Coming Calamity, and using both Herald of Purity and Herald of Agony for great clear speed and insane DPS on bosses. The endgame version focuses solely on Herald of Purity, with more defenses and over double the damage. As you've all come accustomed to, here is the handy colour bar to direct you to each section in particular. Take your time to jump between each section as you please, and don't be afraid to pause at points, as there is a lot of intricate detail in this guide. And lastly, before we continue to the meat of this guide, I would like to just take the time to mention a big thank you to each and every one of you who have followed me thus far. A couple of days ago, we hit 5,000 subs on YouTube, and I cannot believe the support you've all been giving me. If you want to help me grow even further, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications with that cute bell down there as well, so you get notified instantly when my new content is released. Let's face it, you've always wanted to be that guy who comments first on a video. And lastly, if you want to support in any sort of monetary sense to help me continue to push for this as a full-time career, I have a Patreon below with fun perks. And I also stream on Twitch every day. Come say hi, and you can see this build in action. It's my bossing character for the entire league, and it's honestly the best version yet. As stated before, the budget version of this build works very differently to the normal version you may have been seeing on my YouTube channel. This budget version uses the Coming Calamity chest piece. What this allows us to do is use not only Herald of Purity, but also Herald of Agony for a great clear skill. This chest piece means that your Herald skills are only going to reserve 45% mana, meaning that you can sock it in any skill gem you want and nothing will change. However, the downside to this is we can't use as many auras as we use on the standard build. But as you'll see soon, we can still reach insane damage. If you want to follow along with the links and gear, there is a pastebin down below for the budget version, as well as when I talk about the endgame version later, you can check that one out as well. In the Coming Calamity chess piece, this is where we are linking our main skill, Herald of Purity. Herald of Purity is linked with Deathmark, Multi-Strike, Minion Damage, and Impale in a 5-link. If you do have the budget for a 6-link, the next best link is Brutality. A 5-link Coming Calamity is only going to run you about 20 chaos. For the helmet on this build, we're just wanting to look for a good rare helmet with plus to level of minion gems, as well as some good life and to cap out your resistances. Plus 2 minion gems is fine, but if you can get plus 3, that's even better. The reason we want plus to minion gems in our helmet is this is where we will be linking our Herald of Agony. The links are somewhat up to preference with our Herald of Agony, but with Herald of Agony, I've decided that vicious projectiles, greater multiple projectiles, and minion damage is the best way to go. You can change out minion damage for something like Pierce or Chain for even greater clear. This brings us to our main hand weapon. There are two different main hand weapons we will be using on this budget version, but the first weapon I will talk about is Arakali's Fang. The signature ability of Arakali's Fang is the 100% chance to trigger level 1 raised spiders on kill. Coupled with our ball lightning setup I will talk about later, we will be spawning massive amounts of spiders up to the cap of 20 that will just be blazing through maps. When we just need to switch to more damage for bossing, we use Cold Iron Point for +3 to all physical skill gems. Moving back to the Arakali's Fang Dagger, for the clear of the spiders, we will be socketing Melee Splash and Minion Speed. This is all you'll need for your spiders to be spreading like wildfire through maps. In the last socket, we're just going to be putting our Flame Dash. Victario's Charity is an amazing shield for most minion builds, providing a constant source of Frenzy Charge and Power Charge generation. With a 5% chance to generate a Frenzy Charge to allies on hit and a 10% chance for Power Charges on kill, which we can provide through our Ball Lightning setup with Culling Strike, it gives a massive damage boost. In this shield, we will be linking a small cast when damage taken setup, including a level 1 cast when damage taken, a level 10 Steel Skin, and a level 5 Enfeeble. Our boots and gloves are fairly interchangeable in terms of the links and are both there to just also boost our flat life and cap resistances. Also don't forget chaos resistance. This league especially, it can be very rippy without. In the first links we are looking at our ball lightning setup. Now the ball lightning setup is very important for 3 different reasons. First of all, it makes it very easy to proc our Sentinels of Purity on rare and unique monsters. Secondly, it's very easy for us to poison enemies for our Herald of Agony. And lastly, it's also great for the charge generation, as I mentioned before, from our Victario's Charity shield. With our Ball Lightning setup, we are linking Ball Lightning to Poison, Unleash, and Greater Multiple Projectiles. However, we are switching Greater Multiple Projectiles out for Culling Strike if we do not have an Animate Guardian setup with Kingmaker, which I will talk about later, but it is a little bit more expensive that way. For bossing, we can change the Culling Strike to Slower Projectiles. The last 4 link, which is going to be situated in our boots, is our Raise Spectre links. This includes Raise Spectre, linked with Minion Life and Meat Shield. Now the 4th gem is up to you. If you are on a very tight budget, you want to be using Carrion Golem for extra physical damage to the rest of your minions. However, if you have about another 200 chaos lying about, Animate Guardian is the way to go. There is a section later where I will be talking both about the Raise Spectre setup and the Animate Guardian setup, so if you need to jump to that now, go for it down below. With the rings on the budget version, you're actually pretty flexible in what you're using, but in one of the ring slots I would recommend to use an Essence Worm unset ring. This is where you are going to put a good damage aura, which is Pride. For the other ring, all you're looking for is some good life, good resistances, and some dexterity. Last of all, with our gear, we're just looking for a belt. Really, with this belt, we're just after, again, some good life and good resistances. This is another spot we can fit in some great chaos resistance for those delirium mobs. Beside every piece of gear, I'm just going to be putting the average cost. Keep in mind this is taken on Softcore Delirium League at the time of recording. These prices definitely could rise or lower at any point after this. For the cluster jewel selection and the passive skill tree for the budget version, you can skip further ahead into the guide. But without further ado, let's move into the endgame setup. For the endgame version of this build, it makes sense that I actually take you in-game to show you all of the items I am currently using on this character. Right now, I've invested quite a bit into it, but it's actually relatively cheap for a super endgame build for the amount of damage you are pulling out. First of all, we will start with everything that's changed from the budget version, which for the most part is mainly the chest piece. We are no longer using a Coming Calamity. Instead, we are using an Astral Plate. This Astral Plate has great flat life, great percentage increased maximum life, and some good resistances as well. The links are as follows, very similar to the budget version, but one little change. We have our Herald of Purity, linked to Impale support, and Awakened melee physical damage, Deathmark, Multi-Strike, and Brutality. Now, Awakened melee physical damage is quite a bit more expensive than the standard one, being at around about 7 exalts right now, but it is giving us a chance to intimidate on hit, which is meaning enemies will be taking an increased 10% damage. which is basically a 10% more multiplier. Not quite, but similar. This is meaning that we're getting great damage out of this awakened gem. In particular, this chest piece itself is anywhere from about 5 to 10 exalts. So in total, I'm going to approximate the cost of this chest piece and the gems at 12 exalts. We're then going to move to the helmet, as the helmet is a little bit different to the helmet that we were using on the budget version, not because of the gear itself, but because of the links. We are no longer using Herald of Agony because we're not using Coming Calamity. Instead, we are using Summon Holy Relic, linked with Controlled Destruction, Minion Damage, and Feeding Frenzy. Feeding Frenzy is giving a buff to all the rest of our minions in attack and move speed, which is really, really great. Whenever the Holy Relic hits anything, it grants the Feeding Frenzy buff, which is very, very nice. This helmet is not very expensive. I crafted this myself for around about 20 to 30 Chaos Orbs. We then move on to our weapon slots. The Cold Iron Point is just absolutely amazing. As stated before, the +3 to level of all physical spell skill gems, buffing up our Sentinels of Purity. In this, we have linked our Dread Banner with Awakened Generosity. This is just giving a really, really good Awakened Dread Banner aura to all of our minions for great Impale effect and Impale chance on all of our minions. We then move to, we have a Flame Dash also socketed into this Cold Iron Point in an empty socket. We then move to the shield. As stated before, the Victorious Charity Shield is really great in capping our Chaos Resistance, Lightning Resistance, and giving Frenzy Charges on hit to allies. Both of these weapons are, the weapon and the shield are very, very cheap. You're going to be looking at anywhere from 1 to 5 Chaos for each of these, depending on the types of rolls that you do get, so extremely cheap. We're then going to move to the boots. The boots are very important because they have socketed gems are supported by level 20 Fortify. Now, we are no longer also using Ball Lightning in this setup to be able to proc poison because we don't need to for the Herald of Agony. We are back at our Cyclone setup. We have Cyclone linked with Cast While Channeling, Bone Offering, and Desecrate. This is giving us a great chance to block with Bone Offering up, and also our Rumi's Concoction. We sit at 70% to block attack damage and 34 to block spell damage. And every time that we block, because of our notable Mistress of Sacrifice, we are gaining around about 400 life per block straight away, which is really, really great. And that's why we use Bone Offering. So those are the links there. These boots I crafted myself. I got very lucky, but these boots will cost you anywhere from about 1 to 3 exalts to be able to craft yourself. We then move to the gloves. The gloves have the same setup as the previous setup in the budget version. Ray Spectre, Animate Guardian, Minion Life, Meat Shield. Very great. And again, I'll talk about the Animate Guardian and Spectres soon. The belt, again, just looking for good life, good resistances, and some strength on there as well, which is quite nice. If you can get a Stygian Vise, it is good because you can also socket in an Abyssal Jewel, meaning you get a little bit more resistances and some maximum life there as well. Lastly, we will finish off actually with one of the more important parts about this build. This type of build, this endgame build, does not function without 2 of these Circle of Guilt rings. Now, the very important modifier is the Herald of Purity has reduced mana reservation, but then the added extra is the Sentinels of Purity dealing 92% increased damage. Or just increased damage in general. As you can see, I have 2 of these rings here. Now, they don't need to have 48% reduced mana reservation. They can have anywhere from 38% and upwards. The way that you achieve the 48% is you use the life and mana modifiers on these Circle of Guilts. By themselves, these Circle of Guilts can be bought for about 1.5 Exalted Orbs each, so around 3 Exalts in total. The last piece of gear we will be talking about is the Amulet. It is one of the more expensive parts of gear on this build, mainly for its +1 to level of all physical skill gems, and +1 to level of all strength skill gems. This can be crafted by yourself by putting 2 amulets together with an Awakener's Orb, but you may be able to buy one for around about 3 to 6 exalts on the market itself. It is great if you do get a little bit of life on this as well. The cluster jewel setup for the Sentinel Queen is fairly intricate, so I'm going to do my best to step you through each of the stages of the large, medium, and small cluster jewels. On the Sentinel Queen, we're using 2 full 2 passive large cluster duel setups. This is fairly point intensive, but this is where the bulk of our damage is coming from. On the budget version, you just want to be focusing firstly on 1 full setup, and then you can start to focus on your next. If you do need some help learning how to craft duels, there is a link down below for a duel crafting video I did make a couple of weeks ago. That will really help you create your own duels. Otherwise, you can just purchase them from the market at cost price, which I'll try to explain as we go through everything here. For the large cluster duels, and you can replicate what I say here for this one directly for the second large cluster duel setup, we have our large cluster duel. Added small passives are granting minions deal 10% increased damage with 8 passive skills. We are then having 1 passive skill adding Call to the Slaughter, 1 passive skill adding Renewal, and 1 passive skill adding Rotten Claws, then with 2 passive skills being dual sockets. If you cannot get these 4 mods exactly, the mod to first lose is Call to the Slaughter. You still definitely want Renewal and Rotten Claws. That's where the most of your damage is going to be coming from. Just to go through the passives of what these actually do, Call to the Slaughter gives 15% increased damage to minions, and also gives them 10% increased attack and cast speed, and 30% increased move speed if they've been created recently. The created recently also applies when your summon sentinels have been re-summoned by attacking when you're already at the cap of your maximum number of sentinels of purity. So this is a really, really good note. The second one is Renewal. Minions regenerating 1% of life per second is pretty good for their survivability, but the big damage buff is the minions having a 10% chance to deal double damage when they are on full life. With our Sentinels of Purity, as we're constantly refreshing the health of these guys, they're pretty much always on full health. So this is basically just 10% more damage in one node. Lastly, Rotten Claws is giving our minions a 20% chance to impale on hit with attacks. This Rotten Claws, coupled with 1 more Rotten Claws up here for our other large cluster duel, gives 40%, then Dread Banner is giving 60%, and lastly our Impale Duel is giving another 40%. So in total that is 100% Impale chance on our minions, which is absolutely phenomenal. We're then going to move on to the medium cluster duels. The medium cluster duels are exactly the same as each other, and these are on medium cluster duels that have the added small passive skills granting minions dealing increased damage while you're affected by a herald. Now this can be on either a 5 or a 4 passive duel, because we're not going to be taking the 5th passive anyway. The 3 nodes that we are going to be looking for is Disciples, Pure Agony, and then 1 extra dual socket. Now, Disciples and Pure Agony are quite difficult to roll together, but they are absolutely amazing together. First of all, Pure Agony is the signature duel for this build, giving us +1 to maximum number of Sentinels of Purity. On the budget version of this build, this also gives +5 to maximum virulence for our Herald of Agony, meaning that it's dealing much more damage when we get to those full stacks. On top of that, it is giving 20% increased damage while you're affected by a Herald. Disciples also buffs both your Herald of Purity and your Herald of Agony, giving 1% additional physical damage reduction per summon Sentinel of Purity, and you do lose 30%, so you do lose your virulence on your Herald of Agony 30% slower, which is great for keeping your stacks up to the full amount on your Herald of Agony. This also gives 20% increased damage to your minions while you're affected by a Herald. With 1, 2, 3, and 4 of these duels on the build, we are getting a total of 4 extra Sentinels of Purity, 20 extra Virulence, 9 times 4 physical damage reduction, which is 36% physical damage reduction, and our Herald of Agony loses Virulence 120% slower than average, which is absolutely amazing. These duels, they can be anywhere from 100 to 200 Chaos on the market, but you can probably craft them yourselves in around about 50 to 100 Chaos Orbs. And lastly, we're just finishing off with 4 passive small cluster duels with Fettle. What Fettle gives is just 20 to maximum life and 10% increased maximum life. I just went for 2 passives on each of these just to save as many passive skill points as we can. In the next section, I will be talking about the passive skill tree, so we're just going to jump right over to that now. The passive skill tree selections between the budget version and the endgame version of the Sentinel Queen are almost identical. Now there is a link down below for each of them because the gear will change, but the passive points themselves stay very similar. As stated in the last section, some of the more expensive gear on this character can be your cluster jewels. So for the budget version, I would suggest just using this first tree. There is a tab down here for the budget version to switch between endgame final of 1 jewel and the endgame final of 2 jewels of the cluster jewel sections. The 1 jewel section is quite straightforward. As you can see, we just basically come out of the witch area, come straight through, and we select all of these minion damage and some life and mana right up here and take this cluster jewel. Straight away you may not be able to fill this all in because the large cluster jewel is requiring level 60. But we continue down just picking up an equal amount of life and minion damage along the way. Coming all the way down through here, pretty much just picking up some life, some minion damage, a very straightforward tree. If we are looking at the 2 jewel selection, we basically just add the exact same jewel that we've got here and all of the subsequent medium and small jewels into this next area down here. As stated before, very straightforward. Now, the passive skill tree selection for the budget version of the build with the Ascendancy is a little bit different from the endgame version. The budget version is first of all taking Mindless Aggression, going into Unnatural Strength, then we take Commander of Darkness, and finally finishing off with Bone Barrier. This is just giving us an amazing amount of damage / survivability. The other option that you can actually technically use for this budget version of the build is a Guardian version. Now the Guardian version, which I'll just switch over to here right now, is almost identically the same tree. We just take away these points here and instead take these points all through here. The budget version is using the Guardian Ascendancy points of Radiant Crusade, Unwavering Crusade, Time of Need, and then Bastion of Hope. This is going to give us, again, some really good defenses and really good offenses as well. Not as much offense as the Sentinel Queen in the Necromancer version, but actually a little bit better defenses passively, and some great block that we do get through here. The one thing you do miss out is Bone Offering affecting yourself, but for the budget version, as you could see back over here, we weren't even taking that node in the Necromancer Ascendancy. We weren't taking Mistress of Sacrifice because we're not using Bone Offering. That being said, for the end game version of this build, we are actually using, let me just jump here, we are using Mistress of Sacrifice. And then all of the gear will be on this endgame version as well, as you will see. But basically the exact same tree layout with the same cluster jewels and everything like that. You can just balance some resistances if you need and some dexterity through the use of some jewels. There's one jewel socket here. The one thing that is different is this Thread of Hope. This Thread of Hope here, with a large ring passive selection, is allowing us to lose a couple of points here, grab this life node, also grab these Sovereignty, and grab Spiritual Aid, which is very helpful. Now, you are going to be needing to grab both of these mana reserve nodes if you don't have 48% mana reserved on your Circle of Guilts. However, I do myself, so this just makes it a little bit easier. And that is pretty much it, everyone, for the passive skill tree selection. We're just going to move now on to the Animate Guardian and Spectre choices for this build. The Spectre setup on the Sentinel Queen has been refined over time, and with the introduction of many new summonable monsters in 3.10, we have found 2 Spectres to both boost our attack, movement speed, and defenses a lot, with great uptime against bosses. Firstly, I will talk about the monster They of Tool. This Spectre can be summoned in a Tool Breachlord's domain, and grants a snowstorm on the ground whenever he punches it, giving it 20% attack dodge, 20% spell dodge, and 15% reduced damage taken while standing inside. This is a crazy good defensive layer on top of all of our block chance. The second Spectre is an Arena Master, which can be summoned from any Drox influenced zone. Look for monsters bashing their shields. This shield bash actually gives a massive buff to everyone around, like a Warcry, granting 40% movement speed, as well as attack and cast speed for 2 seconds on around an 8-second cooldown. These 2 Spectres are the best I have found for this setup on the Sentinel Queen. The Animate Guardian setup is something that is very helpful, but also very risky, as all expensive Animate Guardian setups are. This setup involves the following items: Kingmaker for Culling Strike and Fortify Aura, Garb of the Ephemeral for massive defenses through no crits being able to be taken and not being able to be slowed below base movement speed, Mask of the Stitch Demon, which, coupled with the anointment on your amulet being Grave Intentions, gives insane amount of life regen per second, basically meaning he cannot be killed by anything other than one-shots, Victario's Flight for an aura move speed buff, and Southbound Gloves to help with percent life increases for survivability. I am blazing through this section, I know, but the main rule here is, if you want an Animate Guardian, always be willing for the chance of him to die. It can happen sometimes, so beware, it is very much a luxury. And that's honestly it for the meat of the guide, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm just going to be leaving you here with some gameplay, first of all from the budget version of the build, running a T16 Maze of the Minotaur map and killing the boss at the end, and then the rest of the clips will be of the end game build, demolishing everything in its path. I'd just like a moment to say thank you to all of my patrons over at Patreon, and I'm just going to list all the names right here so you can see all of these lovely people. Until next time, everyone, Badger out.
I shall cast you into a pit of infinite tortures.
Yeah, that's a bit fast. Do this. Let's go.
Welcome. Time has no meaning here. Your pain will be endless.
Damage. Here we go. How fast am I going to kill him when he's in the bubble? That's still some pretty good bubble damage. Not gonna lie. Let's go. Damage time.
Death, this nightmare may finally end. I'm better.
Got him. Got him.
Killed me 1,000 times.
Yeah, dude.
We're gonna start ripping those. Let's
No,
do
we're not.
teams
Dude, I did a
today.
100% delirious T16 map, and I didn't see his health go below full.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay,
I died
we
5
gonna
times.
do- oh my god. T18, my dude. T18 full delirious. We gotta rip them. We gotta rip them.
Oh, we have to.
Animate Guardians are they're cool, but you need to explore their weaknesses. You
My
know,
goodness.
just in case you ever feel like doing Karma T18s.
His damage is too big.
So I sent a support ticket yesterday. I got stuck in my own hideout.
Oh.
Couldn't move.
Oh, also, so I tried to do one 100% delirious map today. No, it was 60% delirious. We got tons of loot. It was in a tower map. Fought the boss. Game crashed. Went back to my hideout. All portals were gone. Zone blew up. Yeah. So that was kind of not fun.
That sounds like it's not fun.
Yeah, not really.
That sounds like the type of stuff you really want to avoid.
Yeah.
No.
Alright,
sorry,
chat,
dude.
get ready to clip. Get ready to clip. We're getting that flask. Let's go.
Are you keeping loot or?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, get that fast ready.
This isn't over. This will never be over.
Come on, baby. Come on. Let's get that fat loot. Come on, that's twice in a row. I got the garb,
What do you
which
got?
is more rare than the flask. twice in a row.
Wait, what? Are you serious?
Yep.
The garb is more rare
Yeah,
than the
yeah, it is.